Thank you, Jim, and welcome everyone. I'm super excited to be today's moderator for such an important topic. First off, I'd like to say we just heard an excellent presentation from Jorge. He's literally thrown down the gauntlet for innovation in organizations. I don't think anyone could argue with his main assertion that innovation is accelerating, as well becoming more determinative in business success. That said, the fact still remains that in general, there's Canadian companies that are still well behind our international counterparts and competitors when it comes to innovation. Today, we're going to unlock this. And I'm delighted to say that we have Mallory Green, founder and CEO of Irene.com, with us today. Welcome, Mallory.
Thank you so much for having me.
As well, we have Thomas Wardman, Chief Technology Officer with the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada and 2020 CIO of the Year in the nonprofit sector. Welcome, Thomas.
Hi, John. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, too. Folks, some of the things you're going to hear today and have them talk about are the imperative for innovation in their organizations, some of the key restraints and obstacles they face, and how they're addressing the need for accelerated innovation. Again, welcome to both of you. Let's get started with a bit of a warm-up question. So first off, could each of you tell the audience a little bit about your business? Thomas, we'll start with you first.
Yeah, so thanks, John. I'm with the Chartered Professional Accountants of Canada. We're one of the largest national accounting organizations in the world, and we're a respected voice in business, government, education, and not-for-profit sectors.
Fantastic having you here. And Mallory, yourself.
Yes, so my name is Mallory Green. I am the CEO and co-founder of Irene Cremations. We are an online funeral arranging platform. Irene is really a modern approach to funeral planning. I think when you think of the traditional way to make a funeral arrangement, you walk in somewhere, there's a lot of paperwork. It's a very outdated industry. I mean, I don't think it's really changed within the past 100 years. And so we are really focused on simplicity during a really difficult time. We're focused on affordability, so anyone can access really high quality death care, and flexibility, which is really just about educating people on what their options are during the death care process and providing them with the tools to kind of continue on through the process. So I'm really excited to be here and talk about innovation.
Yes, fantastic. Two very different industries, and exciting to have you here. So thanks so much. We've heard that innovation is accelerating, and we've all heard it everywhere. I'm going to assume that you don't dispute this, but perhaps you could comment on what it is that restrains innovation in organizations. Is it regulation, risk aversion? Where do you see the challenges, and how can we overcome them? Mallory, we'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, I think it really depends on, we're, like you said, we're totally different, right? We're in totally different industries. And I think in different size of organizations, from my experience, regulation has always been a hindrance to innovation and technology growth in Canada. Canada generally is pretty behind on innovation in technology. And I saw that at my time at Wealthsimple. I was previously at Wealthsimple, and we were one of the first fintech companies that existed in Canada. The regulatory environment really wasn't built for any type of different approach to financial services. And I've seen that in the funeral industry as well. The funeral industry is essentially regulated per province, and each province, the legislation is very old, and regulators are maybe not so keen on innovation because it hasn't existed up until something like Irene has. And so I think regulation has been a decent amount of hindrance to our approach and our ability to move quickly. Although I would say that what we've seen is many of the governments and ministers have been open to it. I think it's more so on the board sides of those who are actually regulating the industry. The other thing I'll just say, I think within industries that complacency is quite common, especially if something has existed in one way for so long. There is no reason for them to change that if it's working for them. And I know when I first launched Irene, people often told me, well, you should just build software for funeral homes instead of building a direct to consumer business. And I just said there's essentially no way that they would ever want to use our services because there's nothing that's pushing them towards change, right? There has to be businesses like Irene that exist to kind of say, okay, maybe we need to start thinking differently. And we saw that at Wealthsimple when we first launched. None of the banks wanted anything to do with robo-advisors. And then you saw within a few years, they were all launching robo-advisors. So I think businesses like ours need to exist. It's very painful to exist in the early days, but
yes, absolutely.
You have to have, I think that's what drives innovation, right? People who are just so yeah, like they're keen and they're going to push forward no matter kind of the barriers that exist.
Amazing. Two very different industries per se, but
Mm-hmm.
very similar constraints and
Yes.
or challenges when you look at it. So
Yeah.
amazing. And Thomas, how about yourself?
So I would say that for myself, I've been in the not-for-profit sector for a number of years now, and I think this constrains us the most is it's really culture. At the end of the day, I
Yeah,
think that, there's elements of always like every really industry has regulation, has their components to it, but I'd say not for profit really it's that culture piece to it. A lot of the organizations across the country are smaller in their nature. They tend to be more very much focused on their individual causes and the membership that's part of those, and as a result it's really been focused on trying to deliver the mission as much as possible, and that's come in sometimes the cost of just getting it done versus embracing technology. So just getting it done means sometimes we do copy and paste, we do a lot of things just to make it work as opposed to stepping back and then doing it. The other component is it's also hard in the not-for-profit sector to do investment, right? That's a big piece of
right.
it. When you're fighting for every dollar and you're trying to allocate dollars to programming, which is the most important part of any type of not-for-profit or charity organization, investing back in the technology is a big expense. And it's very hard for the organizations to find the financing or the dollars to be able to say, I'm going to invest the large sums of money it takes to move from this sort of like behind positions to forward. So what I try to do is I try to bring the position of how do we do incremental investment? How do we make this not so scary, right? Because the thing is, technology can be very challenging and difficult for various professions to take into, and I've worked with doctors and lawyers and others. So as a result, it's a matter of how do you make it easy? How do you make it approachable? And if you can make the
Right.
technology simple, easier to use, and that's really putting a customer-based focus or a people-based focused on it. There's a really good book, The Technology Fallacy, which talks about all of that, which is really going through the process of saying, it's people-centered transformation. And if you really make it around the people, I find that you can really break it down. Because otherwise you have typical things like silos and things that sort of hold you back. And, technology is not supposed to be in a silo. It's supposed to be across everything. So
Absolutely.
I'd say
That's
that
right.
that would be how that's how we're addressing that type of challenge.
And it breaks down those silos, correct? Or it should.
Yeah, it should. It should
Yeah.
break it down. The reality would be is that I think Jim had talked about this years ago, that the fact that we have Star Trek at home, but there's Flintstones at work. It's still very much at that scenario that we sort of
Yeah.
face. And the idea is, how do you take that consumerism and bring it in to the sector? And I've looked at it and said, myself, the way that's been embracing it has been to try to find solutions that really do make financial sense as well as the people sense behind them.
Got it. Absolutely. When you talk about the people and the customers, um, you know, you both deal with fairly, or I use the word fairly, but absolutely conservative audiences. How does that constrain innovation, or does it create opportunity for you?
I'd like to say a bit of both. I think a bit of both. I think, I mean, within my industry, I'm not targeting one specific demographic, right? I mean, we service people throughout all different generations, and so I always like to use the term meeting people where they are. I think kind of just what Thomas was just saying is, I mean, technology seems very scary to a lot of people, and so how can we make people feel trusting of technology and feel comfortable with what we're providing, and I think that's just being flexible on kind of how you exist today and realizing that's going to be very different from how you exist 5-10 years from now. I mean, that's the point of innovation, is you're constantly iterating and pivoting on how you kind of meet people based on what's happening within consumers. And so I would like to say that there can be hesitation from the consumer perspective. I was just talking to my family the other day about this, and really, when we got our very first customer at Irene, I mean, that
Yeah,
was like the first person who trusted us with something that was entirely new within the entire country. And like, that's an incredible milestone to have.
absolutely.
But I think it's just taking it one step at a time and building that trust and really listening to consumers. Like, what is their hesitation? I know someone recently said to me, my family was really, they were hesitating on using Irene because it was technology focused. And so like really breaking that down of what makes them nervous to use a innovative platform, and I actually think that's just about language. We like how we've changed our language over time since when we first launched to today is very different. I always like to say we are a funeral business enabled by tech. We are not a tech business, and I think that's really key, is just looking at the industry as a whole.
Absolutely. Amazing. And Thomas, anything else to add there?
Yeah, I would say that it's very similar to Mallory. I think that
Yeah.
the component here is that, conservative audiences and versus this one, do they constrain innovation? Well, I prefer to think of it as adding rigor and due diligence to what we're trying to do, right?
Right.
There's a reason. Like, for example, you think about all these regulated professions. The reason they're regulated is because they have life and death implications, or very societal implications if we don't have that regulation. So that needs to be there to make sure consumers are protected and as society as a whole is protected. So we have that. The opportunity behind that is really helping to embrace that due diligence portion of it, and really then take and say, look, we've done our right stuff, we have it. Here's how you do something new, and it's about really bringing that new lens or different vision into it. Like, Mallory, as you're disrupting your industry, you're doing, that's very similar to what we try to do with all the professions that have to deal with this, where we're trying to make sure that I think all of them are dealing with the same challenge, generally speaking, of how do we modernize, how do we capture that, the new not the millennial, but the new generation coming after the millennial generation. So those are all questions we're all asking and grappling with, and the technology has to be part of the solution to that set. It can't be doing it on paper, or a fax machine might work for in a small little office for a long time, but that won't work in the future. So the question is, how do you do this and embrace it that way?
And give people the tools to embrace it, right? I think,
absolutely, like
you said, it is so important. It's like critical to have regulation, especially when it comes to people's finances or their loved ones, and that's why it exists. And so I don't think that innovation has to mean that you are, and I think all of us can agree that means that you're not within the regulation. I think it's important to constantly look at legislation and change it to innovate to where we are today. But I do think that there's something to be said about the importance of, like you said, it's about rigor.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Absolutely. And with that, we've dealt with talking about some of these obstacles in that. What are the keys to innovation? Could you share what are the keys to innovation in your experience? Thomas, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So I think the big thing is keeping it simple, right? Is a big one, right? Having people opt in, meaning that you don't want to drag people along. You want to make this something they want to be part of, and really building effective teams. I think those is really the key to how I see innovation and working through. Because if you get the consensus and you get the other changes with that, it makes people want to be part of it, right? People want to be part of a win. People want to be part of a winning thing at the end of the day. If it's a huge revolutionary step where it's something they're totally different, you're going to get all that opposition to it.
Right.
Whereas if you take it, and I think, Mallory, you've been doing this, incrementally changing the mindset. I love how you described your business as, being in the funeral business, but not, and using technology. That's a different way than framing yourself reverse. And I think I see that very much the same way for us, which is making sure that we're business guided, not technology focused, meaning the technology is the basket by which we float on the boat, or we do our thing, think about that way. But it's not the end all. It's not the end all be all. The technology is just to assist us, to help us be better at what we do, create better employees, better working conditions, better situations for members, making it easier for folks to interact. That is the value of the technology.
Right. It's a means to the end, right?
Yeah.
And it's funny who said, when I say it's kind of a service, a funeral service business enabled by tech, when we first launched on our homepage, it said we were a funeral arranging platform. And I realized the word platform was freaking people out. Like, that didn't resonate. It wasn't the right language. And so we just say funeral, like it's a service, and that's what we are. Right. And so I think, communication is so important in how you frame things. I think building off of your point on keeping it simple, for me, it's always about implementation. And I think this is why tech businesses innovate so quickly. It's because it's not about a perfect product or building everything at once. It's about putting out kind of a minimum viable product and continuing to build off of that. And I think that's so important. It's just getting something out there and starting small and then building off of kind of what your grand vision is. I think that's tech businesses I always say, a tech business can build something within a few months that would take a traditional business years to build, right? And it's because they are constantly putting out updates and learning as they go. And then I think the other one is collaboration for me. It's not necessarily just about collaboration within your organization. I do think that's really important, but it's actually about collaboration between or within your industry, right? Is like learning from other businesses that exist. For me, it's been important to learn from other funeral homes and build relationships, learn kind of what people have done right, maybe what they could have done differently. I've never had the mindset of competition within my industry. I think that technology, our goal is to help consumers have choice. It's not about having the competition within our businesses. And so I've always been really keen to collaborate with others in the industry. I think that will make all of our businesses better. And so I think that's really key to innovation. Like, we will all succeed if we kind of keep up with the times and keep up with the needs of consumers. And so collaboration has always been really important to me.
So neat, so neat. Yeah, it's the ability. You can't work in this bubble, and innovation is moving so fast. You need to move, but at the same time, as you say, communication and listening on the other side, because you have to make those changes, especially in your industry and Thomas, yours as well. Where if something's not going the way or it's pushing away the other way, you're only delaying yourself. So you got to be able to listen and maneuver with it and be flexible. So amazing. Just lastly, folks, is, what new digital technologies do you guys see on the horizon that you think are going to help and offer the most potential for innovation that you're seeing? Thomas, we'll start with you.
So it's all about platforms. I think that's a very common way of doing it nowadays. In the past, we would have had a lot of disparate tools or systems that would have had to glue together to get what you wanted as an outcome. Now it's about the platform. It's about being all in one, the place you can go do that type of work. And I think that's very disruptive. The reason I think it's disruptive, though, is that when we start moving on to platforms, the difference, I think, between a platform and traditional systems is, in a traditional system, you can customize it all you like. It's completely customizable. You can do whatever you want, make it and change it. In the platform world, the real innovation, I think, is that we're going to see is that you have to adapt processes to those platforms, right? And in areas traditionally that are harder to change inside of organizations. So, think of like finance departments or others that have like more rigid sort of things that go on. Those type of things, those are ones where disruption comes from moving to the platforms, because you have to update your way of doing business and all that. And if the businesses I've advised that are not-for-profit that do that, those areas are by far the hardest ones to adopt when it comes to a platform, because there's a lot of the nuances, and I want to keep my thing I'm doing special. The big key to it we sort of see is that the platforms become an equalizer, where at that special thing you were doing, well, it's really not all that special at the end of the day, especially for a back office function. It's more of maybe you have some unique things that you're doing there, but we can certainly, we're more focusing on how we adjust your process to be more flexible and more just in time. So that's what I'm going to say is definitely around the platforms and that type of thing.
Okay, fantastic. Mallory?
Yeah, I mean, I've never, even though I work in the tech industry, I'm not that plugged into like the metaverse or, sending people to the moon. I think there's so much going on our planet and our world that we need to address some of those problems first. I think I've always been very passionate about medicine and science. And I think the pandemic has brought to light a lot of kind of the technologies that need to exist to not only help people access really quality medicine and healthcare, but also just tracking viruses and disease, and how can we build really interesting technology and innovations within that. So I've always been interested in healthcare. And the second one, actually, and this is totally random, but my co-founder recently sent me, Google created these glasses. They look like reading glasses, but as someone speaks to you in a different language, they translate for you. So you see the translation. Yeah. So I'm always interested in technologies that really help kind of unite people and bring people together. And there's so many interesting things happening. I would love to see a lot more in the end of life space. We have an increasingly aging population, and we need to create a better end of life experience. So I'm excited also to see anything technology wise. I'm in a group called Death Care North America, and there's different people creating really interesting technologies on that front as well.
Phenomenal. Mallory, Thomas, thank you so much. This was an excellent insights into innovation. A couple of things we heard today, folks, is, innovation accelerations is people driven. It's not technology driven per se. And that's the best way to look at it and move it forward. We have two industries here that are very conservative, very different, as you heard. And, they're governed by regulations, regulatory, there's rules. It can be complicated and scary. But the fact is, when you look at it and bring technology in, you can be innovative, you can still be disruptive, and at that time provide more choice for the consumers and do the right thing and still move this forward at the speed that that innovation's moving. So again, folks, thank you so much. I think it was a great conversation today, and I'll pass it back to you, Jim. Thanks.